Excellent. Well, welcome back to 2023 and Account-Based Fridays. And we've got a great conversation today with Kristin Hege, who is part of Convey Communications. Are you the CEO or founder, or both, Kristen?
Both.
Both. Okay,
Actually.
there you go.
Yeah.
We can't think of a more critical role right now in marketing and communications than what Kristen and her firm does. I can't wait to dig in on this. Each week, as you know, we start off with a poll. And this week's poll, we talk a little bit about, actually, it's a prior poll that we did a few months ago. And why we're doing a prior poll is we thought it'd be relevant to kind of compare and contrast what we saw maybe 7 months ago to today's environment. So if we ran the same poll, we might get very different results. And it's noted that we only had 11 people that voted on this one, but I think the importance is still there, where a lot of enterprises are trying to reach out to that C-level suite and connect with them. And so the question that I was asking at the time was, how do you plan to invest to reach to these C-level suite? And executive outreach, one-to-one outreach was the leader, as was the live Zoom roundtables. I don't know, Megan, what was your point of view on this poll that we had?
Yeah, well, executive outreach, I'm not surprised by, because I think that's a perennially effective, peer-to-peer contact. That said, I'm shocked by the 0 next to thought leadership, because one of the things we know is really effective in reaching senior decision makers is if you can put information, in particular data, in front of them that they can't get anywhere else or that they've never seen. And being able to prove your potential to help them through providing them with information that is impactful seems to me like a pretty good way to engage an executive. Versus, I think at this point in the game, roundtables were starting to get a little bit tired. So I would say, it's probably, if you placed live events in that category, you might see more of that now. But thought leadership seems to me like a big miss in terms of where you want to engage your senior most decision makers. Kristen, we're so excited to have you here today. I had the pleasure of working with you as a client, and just was really impressed by what Convey Communications brings to the table and the strategic approach that you took to helping us, really amplify our brand, our story, our thought leadership in the market, and what you've been able to do for others as well. But I would love to get your take on that, because that seems counterintuitive to me. Like if I'm in your shoes, wow, what am I supposed to work with?
That's literally what I thought. I mean, if you're going to reach out to them, what are you reaching out to them with? I mean, what are you giving them? Yeah, thought leadership, especially in B2B, is so powerful. And so, we have to stand out, our clients have to stand out. They have to show their expertise, and it's not always email. Not everybody's reading every email you send. And it's definitely that omni-channel approach, but thought leadership should be a high priority in not only your comms, but your marketing, but your comms campaigns too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd be interested to hear from you in terms of PR as a category. Although I think what you do is more I'll call it in the realm of communications and media and influencer strategy. It's bigger than that. But we'll put the label on it that most of us think about, and that's the budget line item that many of us have in our marketing budget. Thinking about some of the tough choices that businesses are making right now around budget for functions like marketing, what are some of the ways that you're coaching clients, or clients are asking you for help to justify their investment in your category?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times people that come to us, they come to us for, that high level media, get us in the press kind of thing, which is only one very, I would say, smaller arm of what PR can do. Everybody's asking to do more with less, right now. That's the case. And it has been actually since COVID. But what we try to do and really tell our clients, what are you working on? What ebook just went out? What can I take from that ebook and use it as a pitch and put into a blog post, or repurpose as a thought leadership piece and put in a trade publication that actually is reaching someone within your funnel to influence that purchase. And so there's, so marketers work so hard to create so many great things, but they stay in marketing and sales, and they don't always think about PR. So we'll go through and we'll ask, what is your most popular blog post, or what was your most downloaded piece of content? That proves to us that there's a need and a want for it. So then what can we do with it? So it's actually getting most of, what do they say, more juice out of the squeeze for a lot of the content.
Yeah, and I know one of the challenges, certainly that I've had in the past in marketing roles is helping senior leaders, CEOs in particular, understand that getting in whatever the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times or choose your favorite isn't necessarily the end all. Like that might not be the holy grail of media positioning. What's your advice for marketers trying to help people move away from some of those like bigger is better to focused is better?
Yeah, well, first, yes and amen. Thank you. It's so true. There's so many stakeholders within a company when it comes to communications. Investors and C-levels, they love that top tier. And who doesn't love Wall Street Journal, right? Back in the day, it used to be, I want to be on Oprah. And so right now, it's like that's important. It's always important, but it's not always where your buyer is. So that's what the tough challenge that comes back and say, yeah, we can use so many of our hours to do it and, get it or whatever, but is that actually going to move the needle later beyond the first initial shock of, yes, we're in, Wall Street Journal or TechCrunch or whatever your top tier definition may be. And what can we do with it then? And so for us, we like to say, and what I think is important for any agency, if they're not doing it, talk to your agency, is understanding the buyer journey for whatever your company does. And so we should be touching each part of that funnel. That top tier is great, but it gets top of funnel. And so how can we actually ensure that your buyer is reading and understanding what it is that you're trying to solve for them? So while top tier is great, it doesn't guarantee that everybody, the stakeholders, the people that are actually going to sign up for the demo, the people that are going to, take that meeting actually saw it, because most likely they're reading the trade publications to educate themselves and understand the industry and what's going on around them. That's not always your New York Times coverage. It's just not. So that's what we tell them. It's a great opportunity, but it usually doesn't turn out to reach the buyer that you're trying to reach.
Just thinking about this environment that we're in, and you play such a critical role right now in the outreach and kind of reaching that buyer that a lot of companies, quite frankly, are struggling with right now.
Mm-hmm.
Add to it potential layoffs internally, the pressure now for the agency, or the ability for the agency to reach out to these buyers, is probably even greater than ever before. And I also noticed, as my own agency, I've noticed that companies don't always properly engage, or everybody engages you slightly differently. As
Mm-hmm.
you've developed the company, what have you learned are kind of the blind spots, or how could companies better engage you to, in this environment, to really maximize that outreach to that buyer?
Yeah, I think there's two departments that we should and always have a good working relationship. And the first would be customer success, for sure. A lot of times we don't get all the cool case studies unless y'all tell us. Sometimes, you guys know, sometimes you can't put them out there, in print, but we can use them to tell stories to the media. So we really need to know what's happening from a customer standpoint, because, I said earlier to Megan that newsrooms are shrinking. And so the value of what we're sending to the media to get coverage for can't just be like, my client's doing really great things, come talk to them. It's real hard facts. Here's what they're doing. Here's who they did it for. And then the other one is sales. A lot of times we like to say, what are the objections? Why didn't you win the deal, right? And if you didn't win the deal because they didn't clearly understand what you were doing, or they shouldn't have been in the funnel in the first place, we can actually help with that. We can help drive more awareness to the right people. Obviously it's on the next day turnover result, but we should be working in lockstep with that so that we can actually know, hey, these people go all the way to here and they thought we did this. That's the kind of things we like to know. So going in and really, to your point, having to do and get gritty and get scrappy, that's where PR can come in. And the other one I didn't mention was partner relationships or influencer relations. What are you doing with your partners? It's really great that you guys are doing great, co-selling or whatever webinars, but what about blog swaps? What about podcasts? What about what can we get you guys doing together, and kind of, I would say, ride the coattails of each other's success to get more visibility. And those three pieces don't always come into play when people think PR, because they're thinking, oh, media relations and press releases. And that's so little compared to all the things we can do.
What are some of the tactics or the sort of outlets that you see being most effective right now? Like if you think about where your clients are getting the coverage that does contribute to that buyer's journey, what places is that coming from?
We do a mix, and I I hate to say out loud sometimes because we say you never pay for PR placements. So many of your larger publications, your Inc., your Entrepreneurs, your Fast Company, your Forbes, they do have a paid contributor arm where you can actually narrate the story that you want to tell. You can do one of 6 series. You can do lots of things. There can be a little bit more there where you're actually having a say into what you're saying and not just have to fit into someone's editorial calendar. So we always suggest someone to do that. The cost of it is minimal. It's like $2,000 for the year, and you get to play all year. That combined with placed content from your PR person. So say you are in, MarTech, you would go to a CMS Wire or a marketing profs or whomever you're trying to reach, and really write something that's valuable, non-promotional, for that outlet that shows the buyer, hey, they actually understand me. They know where I'm at. They know what I'm trying to solve. They're not just, throwing out their taglines all the time. And it builds trust, not only awareness, it builds trust because you're teaching at the same time before you're selling. And then sales can use those. They put them in their plays. They put them in all of, marketing puts them in their campaigns, and it really works. But we try that 2-pronged approach: the ownership of the conversation, and then following the rules of the outlet, and still educating at the same time.
Imagine you're reaching out to a number of different vehicles there. It sounds like, whether it be the business trades or the technical trades. I guess another dimension too would be the message and how it may have evolved pre-recession. I don't even know if this is a recession or not, but everybody seems to think it is.
Everyone's preparing for it.
Yeah, exactly. It's the most predicted recession ever, and at least in my lifetime, and I've had a lot of years on that. But I'm curious, like, how involved do you get in the message, and how have you seen the message change, or what should people be talking about now that maybe 6 months ago that they weren't really talking about at all?
I definitely think it's the customer, right? Less focus on the brand and more focus on the value to the customer, because that's really what people are doing. If they're still buying right now, they want to know they're buying value. So that value prop story through the eyes of someone winning, that's not the brand, is gold compared to, this executive is really smart and he started this company. This is why it's great. Those are great and they win sometimes, but right now, more and more, we're getting a lot of traction with customer stories.
I'm curious to get your take. One of the ways a lot of companies find those customer stories is through running their own awards program. And you just made me think, how do you see a company's own awards program playing in that portfolio of PR and media engagement?
Yeah, we asked, what is the goal? So if you're trying to hire top tier talent, right? We always run the best places to work and the culture. We always have to have a place for the culture awards. Then there's the product awards, making sure that the product is getting recognized for what it does, or service, what it does, and the executives and the team leadership. But then there's also the customers, and what some clients, when we bring a new one on, they've just never heard of the approach of the brand submitting for the customer. And that's, I would say, at least 50% of the customer, or 50% of the award motions that we're doing, where it's, the brand pays for it and they make the customer the hero. And then within this submission somewhere, it's like, oh, and X company helped us get there. And then both people are promoting it. It makes the customer feel valued and know that the brand is seeing what they're doing is great. And knowing that the brand's not getting the award itself. So it's building this mutual relationship of success and recognition. So we usually have those 3 prongs. Not everybody has all of those, either budget or motions in place, but that's what we present. And we think that's a well-rounded award strategy.
Do you see many companies running their own awards? So like they're recognizing their own customers? And do you see that as effective? Like saying, hey, this is the, XYZ company awards to our customers?
Yeah, we see that quite a bit not quite a bit. You see the listicles, right? Here's your 25 influencers in X industry to follow. And that actually plays really well. I mean, it really does. People like to read the lists. They feel included in part of it. And then their own awards programs, whether it's a champion program or that, it's a big undertaking if they have the team to do it. Awards are not easy to take off the ground, but it does actually, from a customer success and branding and brand loyalty and trust, it really does help with the customers. It's just, my advice there is, if you're going to do it, stay to it. Not just, we had this idea and this year we did it and then next year we didn't. So it is a commitment for multiple, whether it's quarters or years or however you do it.
And thinking about kind of your earlier comment about the different vehicles that you can use, podcasts and different outreach areas, is there anything that companies could or should be doing to make your time more effective? Like, should they be creating the content and using you more as leveraging that content, or do you co-create content? Like, what's the optimal handoff there to really maximize kind of your ability to make an impact?
Yeah, I think it's both. And I say both because we should be using what you're already doing in some of our efforts. But the other, it is the PR team's job to ideate these opportunities. We shouldn't just be coming to a meeting and then you guys tell us what to do. It's here's what we see in the market, here's what people are talking about, here's what's trending, here's our suggestion. And then with the creation of the content, I mean, I think everybody's agency is different. We create all of the content for the client. And the reason why we like that is selfishly, we know we're going to make a deadline because they're busy and they have their things. But we create we get in, we get to understand the voice, and then we write everything and create the content, from infographics to ebooks or white papers. Every agency is different. Not all of them do it that way. We do because we want to be as valuable as possible. So everybody has an idea of a blog post that, oh, I wish I had time to write that. Well, we'll write it for you. Just give us 20 minutes on the phone call and we'll do it. So that's the exchange. And I think I have yet to be on, whether it's a new client call or a client we've had for years, where that isn't valued, that taking it off their plate, it's still their voice. They still get to be part of it, but they don't have to create the content. And I think when you see that 0% thought leadership, some of that I guarantee comes down to would be really great to have, but we don't have the time. And that's why when they think of PR agencies, some people will be like, oh, I thought I needed a content agency for that. Well, no, we control the voice and the tone and everything else we do. We might as well help with your content as well.
Yeah. What are some of the ways, like you mentioned, getting on a call with a thought leader or others in the company to get that story? What are some other ways you help your team or you coach your team to acquire the knowledge they need to write effective content? Because that's usually the hard part, right? Is they're not experts in everything.
You mean our team or
yes, your team, like your team? How do you help? What's your coaching to them to get smart on a given topic?
Yeah, so we always want to just hear the client speak. So whether we go on and watch webinars that we've done, that the client's done that we haven't been part of, we read previous things. We just really deep dive. With you have ABM, all of our clients, or all of my staff is ABM certified. We're content marketing certified, and we're PR people. But we really have to understand what they do and what they're speaking to. And I think part of that is because we have for me specifically, we have a very specific niche in B2B. And so I think that if you're working with an agency, there's a lot of wonderful agencies out there, but it's really hard to be everything to everybody. There's really great ones in B2C. There's really great ones in fintech. There's people that have a niche. And I think the more that you can find one that has the niche and understands what you're saying, the less that onboarding, oh my gosh, they have no idea what we're doing. That's not at the table. They actually do understand.
I imagine measurement is a pretty critical question that comes up. Like, how do we know we're effective with PR, or we spend this and what do we get, which is kind of the non-marketer question, right? Like anybody who's been in marketing realizes that, if it were that easy, we'd all be on a beach, but it's not that easy at all. But I'm curious, in your experiences of having to measure, like what's being presented, or what do you recommend as a best practice to say, hey, this is what good looks like?
If it's not aligned with the business goals that the company is trying to reach, it just ends up being vanity, like everybody else metrics. We can say 5 media placements, or we got you placed in 6 articles for the quarter. But if we're not engaged in helping other people, like if a KPI of a marketing team is to increase awareness of customer case studies, if we're not helping them hit that goal, ultimately we can just be like anybody else, right? Because anybody can write a press release or reach out to the media. But if we're not working lockstep with a team that is willing to share their goals and us go, okay, well, let's change this that we thought we were hired for and really go into here, at least for this next quarter, to make sure that you hit your goals, that's how we do it, right? Some people will have different goals. They want to create a category. Okay, then winning is eventually some analyst uses your category name in a report, right? That's how we measure. So it may seem like, kicking the can down the road to answer that question, but it really does depend on the business goals and how we can. And there's times where we'll say that's just not something we can align with. We don't do that. That's not something we do, and we'll be honest. But a PR agency should be working in lockstep with a team to hit an internal goal, or we're just replaceable. It's true.
Yeah, I think that's good advice for marketing measurement in general, right? Or any kind of measurement. As a matter of fact, I was just working with some of my colleagues yesterday on that. Right? Basically saying, what are our goals as a business, and then how are each of the functions within the business going to contribute their piece of that puzzle, and how is and how do you coach your team to say, is everything we're doing from blog posts and thought leadership to awards to anything else that may fit into this category, how does that line up against those objectives? I think that's a really, really important discipline to get into. So I appreciate that you're approaching it that way. I'll switch gears a little bit now, because some of the news that's out there these days is not so good. And I remember back early in my marketing career, one of the things I learned about crisis communications was tell it all, tell it first, and tell it yourself. I'm curious to know if those rules still apply. And also, how are you coaching your customers to handle when they need to share bad news, whether that's a layoff or a missed quarter in terms of performance or whatever it might be. And and it's something I think a lot of people haven't had to deal with in a while, because the rising tide was for sure lifting all boats. And now, we've got some different, more nuanced stories to tell. I'm curious to know what you're hearing and seeing, and how, what advice you'd offer.
Yeah, when it works well is when we know early. Earlier the better, right? There are, people don't always think that, because they're like, we're not going to announce this, but we can help advise on how to announce it internally. There's, internal comms and there's external comms, and we should be both. And we've found, layoffs are not a surprise for a lot of people. And if those are the type of things that if we know early, we can help massage the messaging, which sounds negative, but we can help create the messaging with you for internal. How is this, thinking through all the stakeholders. And I think what's important is we're not in the emotion of the day to day. We don't know those faces that are going to be laid off. So we can actually have a little bit of a different perspective of how things are received. And we believe in transparency 100%. If not, it always comes back. Always comes back to get you. But the transparency, the straight to the point, but definitely use your people that are trained to do it. Let them read the statement first. Let us help you craft it, both internally. Obviously, externally, we usually always get that part, but we don't always get the part internally. And they don't always understand that how it's received internally is what's going to be told externally, just not under your control. So we like to be part of that as well.
Yeah, that's a huge point. I think some of what we've seen that's actually negative isn't so much about the layoffs themselves. I think intellectually people can process, businesses have to make choices, but it's the manner in which it's conveyed to the employees in particular that I think can really come back to haunt a business if it's handled in a way that is perceived as negative or disrespectful or not transparent. I think that's a really good point. I hadn't really thought about that, is tapping into communications experts, external experts, to help make sure your internal communications aren't going to land not as you intend. That's good advice. Thank you.
Yeah. It's an unfortunate thing to have to participate in.
Well, just building on that, and it's probably related, where in this environment, as companies shrink, they're also going to start getting more acquisitive, meaning they're going to acquire companies and they're going to consolidate, and maybe bringing you into that conversation at a point. Like, not everybody can be brought into that, but I would imagine you would play a pretty critical role in messaging that initial combination of companies, and you might start seeing some more of that. I don't know if you're seeing that now or not, but I would imagine you could play a pretty critical role in that as well.
Oh, absolutely. When there is a acquisition, we always create, there's the how to communicate to the customers, how to communicate internally, and then it's how to answer it to the press and how to answer it, and then we combine them together, trying to find the answers or the questions that anticipate the questions that everybody's going to be asking, and how you say it to your customers is different to how you say it to the media, and how you actually express that value of that acquisition and when things are going to happen, and calming the fears and the excitements at the same time is an interesting feat. But yeah, we should always be part of that, and it's actually an exciting part to be of, or thing to be part of.
Question for you to build on that is, I think we all, like when you're part of a company that's part of a merger or an acquisition, you think everybody and their brother is going to care about that, just the fact of that. But I
Yeah.
think the reality is it's customers care, right? And employees care and investors care. But sometimes the media doesn't show up and you're kind of like, oh, well, that's disappointing. Like, why don't they care? Are there any things that companies can do when they do have news of mergers, acquisitions, that kind of effort to make it more newsworthy and interesting to the broader influencer and media community?
Yeah, I think the media, I mean, M&A is happening, right? It's happening at a rapid pace, especially since COVID. So it's not necessarily news unless it's truly impacting news to, the broad media, unless it's truly impacting and going to make the industry different. It's going to change it. That's news. But we've had a lot of success telling the story of the acquisition. My favorite thing to tell is like two CEOs. What do they do? Everybody wants to know, but how does this happen? What happened? And telling, creating content around it. Here's how we combine cultures. Here's how, when you bring two teams together, here's how you do it, and really teach other organizations that may be thinking about it. Hey, here's what you do when there's three CEOs under one roof and only one's still the CEO, and really talking about it and being transparent, because that is what people want to know. So we've had success setting up interviews with those types of things, with podcast interviews on combining cultures or creating one culture under one roof, or international businesses working with US. And so really that's the stuff people want to know. They understand that it's probably going to be good or you wouldn't have been acquired in the first place, but what can we learn from it that will impact business of the future and other because reporters want to tell stories. They want people to learn things. And so if we can give them something to learn at the same time being able to announce this acquisition by way of why the article is happening, it's a win.
Awesome. And just looking at time here, we're approaching the bottom of the hour. This is terrific. I think your agency or that type of work is really, really needed right now in this environment. And hopefully people can kind of see that, if they have the foresight to rely more heavily on agencies than maybe the internal people that might be leaving. You could play a pretty critical role. Any closing thoughts, Megan or Kristen?
Kristen, thank you for being here. I think this is a really important topic. Communication is so critical to so many things, and often I think we assume we're all good at it naturally, but the fact is no, and you do need to have professional support for that, and experienced, and as you said, also sometimes dispassionate support for that. That's not so wrapped up in the politics of the words or the internal jargon. So I appreciate that you bring that to the table, and that your category really brings that to the table, and we need to remember that. Any other thoughts or things that you're excited about kind of as we go into 2023?
I'm excited about, I don't know so much about that. I mean, I'm something that always excites me is research, and we are definitely, as an agency, really trying to help clients get more of that third-party research out the door, because sometimes you have to kick up your own dust and create your own news. So I'm really excited about molding that as an offering for us specifically, but that's personally. I think just the advice I would give is ask your agency questions, even if you have one now or you're about to ask them the tough questions. How can you help with this? Ask them the questions that seem like, I don't think an agency could ever do this, but you'd be surprised at what we can do. So ask your agency questions, work alongside with them. Don't keep them in a silo because they can't work with what they don't have. And I think if you do those two things, your relationship with your agency will flourish, and you'll start seeing more, sparked ideas, more inspiration from both teams. But you don't know what you don't ask, and the agency the same way.
Yeah, amazing. Well, Kristin Hege, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you being part of Account-Based Friday. And thanks to everybody who joined us. We appreciate you being part of Account-Based Friday.
Absolutely.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, thanks for joining us and investing the time from Arizona. And next week, we've got Esther Kim. She's a CMO of Reek. I can't wait to get Esther on. It's been a while since I've talked with her, but next Friday, we'll be right back at it and doing it again.
All right. Happy Friday, everybody.